Welcome to another exciting edition of Liquid Weekly. We're drinking and podcasting here. Some of us are. And today we're so excited. Water, yes, of course. We're so excited to invite and welcome David Lindahl, freelance Shopify developer and founder of the Rainier Watch brand, to our show. David, it's so good to have you on. Good to see you. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first-time caller here. So ready to answer and ask all the awkward questions.
David, do you even know what this podcast is about?
I think we're talking about the best way to mow a lawn. Is that right?
Yes.
That's what I remember.
Shopify Developer Lawn Care podcast.
I have opinions.
Yeah, stripes. How do we get stripes? That's really my main question.
Yeah, dude.
You hire somebody out. That's how you get them.
Got lots of things I could say about lawn care, which we won't. But one of the things we like to do is we like to kick off the beginning of every episode with a little, hey, what's going on in your week, what you've been focusing on. So, Taylor, what have you been doing? Anything useful?
Oh, man. Useful? That's debatable. So, yeah. For useful, no, as far as like client work and stuff, I'm like really heavy into a redesign where I think I've been talking about this for a long time and weeks and stuff at this point, because we're basically redoing this whole like vintage, theme. So vintage does all the pre 2.0 stuff to a new redesign that's leveraging meta objects. I'm very excited about that's been going really well. And that's the big thing there. And then the handful of other brands, it's more just about kind of like working around some integrations we have with fulfillment. I'm using Flow a lot more, which is really, really fun. That was a new fun thing that came out not too long ago. Like Shopify Flow, you can run console logs now too, which is really handy. And so there's a lot of cool stuff coming to there that's eliminating even more needs for the app. So I complain a lot about, like, as theme devs, we're losing a lot of space to apps that are pushing further and further into things like, customer accounts and all this other stuff or whatever. But there are also things now that, like, I don't have to reach for an app or recommend an app anymore because we can do it with Flow with a handful of different automation things. So really cool stuff as far as that. And then personally, just starting to enjoy some nicer weather. We just finally had that backyard deck was built and finished. And so we get to enjoy it as the weather gets nice. And I've been having like breakfast outside every day, working in the morning out there, except for today because it's raining. David sent some of his like nasty rain weather over this way, and I'm mad about it. But we've had sunshine a lot this week at least, and so that's been nice. Just enjoying the nicer weather, and I'm just over 2 weeks out at the time of this recording from my first sprint triathlon of the year. So training for that is going well, and then I'm not too hurt yet, and so I'm excited about that.
That's hardcore, man.
Yeah. It is hardcore. Not really. I don't
Speaking
know.
of triathlons, I ran yesterday so far. I did like 2 miles, super solid pace, like 13 minutes a mile. Dog only stopped like 10 times to sniff.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty much on the same level as Taylor here.
You lapped all those people on the couch, and that'd be a PR for me. So amazing.
Yeah, it was for me. Running's hard. Like, congrats. Like, it is not easy. I used to run a lot more, and I've done a half marathon before, like centuries ago, basically. But
yeah,
it's good.
The marathon seems too far for me. That's why I do these. I gotta split it up. A little bit of swimming, a little bit of biking, a little bit of running.
Yeah.
Marathon, no way.
All the torture,
all running,
just little bits of torture all over.
Yeah. Well, David, I know we're going to dig in with you here in a second, but I'll have you go next just so we can hear a little bit about what's present-day David working on besides caffeine consumption.
Yeah. Check. So, this week has been bouncing around on 1,000 million things per usual, but a lot of the client stuff I've been working on I've been on 2 different audit and implementation reports, kind of CRO reports.
Nice.
And that's been really fun. I love digging into the front end of coding and websites. That's a lot where my background lies. And it's especially fun to like dig into these reports that I know will have a positive effect on the AOV and revenue and everything like that for clients. And so that's been really fun. And it's cool just to kind of see all these different changes that they're recommending for different sites, and also able to draw on my experience and like change things as we needed. Because sometimes reports like that are great, but they're static, and websites are dynamic. And so there's sometimes little gaps that need to be filled in. So that's been super fun to be able to dig into the weeds on those for a few different clients. Bouncing around on Nearwatch stuff, like there's a million things happening in the ecom world and trying to keep pace with that. So I've had some fun conversations this week with a couple other founders, which is always good to pull your head out of the weeds and kind of realign and commiserate on how really, really hard e-commerce is and how stressful and almost like, like serious stuff like depression and anxiety and those sorts of things can really rear their head when it comes to being a merchant on Shopify and being controlled by numbers in some ways. So that's been probably a pretty good highlight of my week. I mowed the lawn. That was also a good highlight. Which is
not
always
with the
fun.
stripes though. Didn't get those stripes.
I did diagonal though, so it does look pretty good.
Very professional.
But yeah, I think that's like a lot of this week. It's hard to sit back and like take a high level look at things, and I feel like that's important in some ways because usually I'm just like, I've got 7,000 things I want to get done today. Let me try and do at least 3,000 of them, which is never possible. But I never actually like sit back and think about high level stuff. I just feel like I'm putting out fires all day. So it's good to kind of do the recap thought.
Yeah, we're here for you, David. We want to help you think more strategically. So that's really the point of our podcast. It's like a... Yeah.
Perfect.
Anyway.
Let's get into inventory management and how to fire sale, X
What's
amount
that?
of...
I'm breaking up right now. I'm going through a tunnel.
Yeah.
All I know is that if you want to sell something, coffee mugs. That's the way to go. That's the game, right?
Oh,
Taylor?
get out of here. Knock it off.
So,
I've done that. You want to... I could get into that.
I did it unsuccessfully. I can tell you all the ways you should do it. So
nice.
Well, since everyone's asking what I've been up to,
Carl, what about you,
thanks.
Carl?
The people want to know.
Taylor.
People want to know.
Shopify side has actually been a little quiet the last week or two. I wrapped up a store import, and luckily this was an easy one using Matrixify as usual, but it actually was through WooCommerce, and they have an API.
Nice.
So I was able to that automated a lot of like the bringing over of the data, and just had to deal with conflicts and error imports, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
My one thought after doing several of these is across the board, I just don't understand how, without a fail, the phone number field tends to be like the most terrible field in terms of data quality, and it throws the most issues with Shopify imports. And so I just end up, I got all these orders that failed to import, just delete all the phone numbers, and it just works. It's like, no one's going to call them anyway, right? So,
right. What are we using the number for anyhow?
But I just don't understand how these other e-commerce systems ever how they're getting that information from the customer, because it's just bizarre how it comes through. Email is fine. Street address is fine.
Have you talked to Daniel about this that we had on the podcast from AbleStar? I wonder if he has opinions about this, because that's one of his apps does imports data from WooCommerce to Shopify. I bet he's got some opinions. Yeah, he helped me out. That's what I picked a couple weeks ago as my sick pick, because he helped me out quite a bit here with some stuff we were doing with Product Boost and Search and Discovery. So
nice.
Check with Daniel, see what he says.
I will do that. And then speaking of lawn care, I've been mowing my lawn because I got back from a trip and it was long. And we have a gas mower, but a few years ago I picked up one of those old-fashioned push reel mowers that someone put at the side of the curb. I thought this is perfect because we're often outside watching the kids all around, and like to be able to just do a few rows and not create a lot of noise and fuss, it's fine, right? So I was using that yesterday because I broke my gas mower. The safety thing on it is really whack right now. And my neighbors keep saying, Karl, what the hell are you doing? Why are you pushing that mower? Do you need a mower? Like, what's going on? Like, no, I'm doing this on purpose. It's a good workout. It's fun. Anyway,
I've thought about picking up one of those. I thought those looked really cool. So I have a gas one now. I have an electric one as well that I used to use, but the deck on it is so small that it takes me forever to mow if I use that one. And so I can't do the whole thing on even a couple of extra batteries that I have laying around. So it's like I just end up using the gas one.
Sorry to hear your plantation's a little too large.
Boys. I don't even live on an acre. I think my battery capacity is just not good. Either that or I let it get too high.
Double A, or what are you doing?
Yeah, how does yours work? 17 AA batteries. That's what it takes. What is your
all those watch batteries?
If
Anyway.
I was you, I'd have the kids mowing, man. I'm like chomping at the bit from when I can have my little workers out there just keeping the yard all manicured, you know?
Well, that's why we have little humans, isn't it?
That's why we started the family. Yeah.
With the real mower. It's legitimately difficult to push though, and so for a child, my oldest is going to be 11. Like even that is hard. So I think an electric mower is the way to go, and then add the child labor.
Yeah,
and you're
they're real light. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean they're real responsive too. As soon as you let off, like it just stops. So like if they fell or something, like it's not like you got to be worried about them going after somebody.
Well, hey, thanks for joining us. Another exciting episode of Shopify Devs Do Lawn Care. As always, wait, that's not what we're here for. That's a good thought. So let's jump into the meat of our podcast focus here, which is with David. David, as I warned you beforehand, I always like to do a little bit of a hero origin story. Like, how did you become the marvelous specimen of a human being that you are standing before us today? And if you could, throw in a little bit of a how you got into development as well along the way, that'd be cool. So you've got an interesting background, so kind of give us the 30,000 foot, how you got to where you are and what you do.
Lots of accidents. Basically, I started mowing lawns when I was 13, and so after that point, let's see. So a prior career. So I started my career in the financial services world. That didn't have enough like creative outlet for me, so I started downloading HTML5.net templates and changing words on them, and then boom, I was a coder, right? And so after that, I went through a career pivot into web development like 7+ years ago or something like that. There's a fork in the road, and I took it, picked it up, ran with it, went to a coding school, did that. That was, besides childbirth and raising a human, that was the hardest thing ever. But raising a human's a whole nother level. At the time, that was extremely difficult, exhausting, like 12+ hour days kind of thing. Just like, it's so funny to think about now, wrapping your head around trying to understand variables and functions and like coding's, it's so second nature now because I do it daily for hours and hours. But going back to that turning point and that point in time, it was wild. But fast forward through the years, spent time at a few different agencies working on some really cool projects for big and small names, as well as like a cool startup that's basically building Shopify for grocery stores, for like small grocery stores, mom and pop shops that don't have, like a Kroger or Albertsons dev department of like 50 people or whatever. It was a white label platform. It was a really cool company. And then, so fast forward through that and landing in Shopify world, I also run a little e-commerce brand, slinging teas on the weekend and before 7 a.m. and after 5 p.m., that sort of thing. And that's kind of how I found Shopify. I started the store back on card.co, not an e-commerce platform. It's a single page web builder, horrible website. This was like before I was a designer, before I was a web developer. And then moved to Big Cartel, and then moved to WooCommerce, and heard about Shopify, but was always like, oh, it's too expensive. I'm a developer now. I can manage my own DevOps and manage a server. And that was a horrible mistake, and I regret, and Shopify is too expensive. And so that was one of the biggest regrets, top 10 in my life, I'd say, not switching to Shopify from day one. So a couple years went by. I eventually switched so I built a headless store trying to use Shopify. Also a mistake, because this is still a side hustle at that point. And finally, what was this, like 2 years ago maybe, I switched over to the hosted Shopify version and have been there for my brand, my e-commerce brand, since then. It's been amazing. I love it. I feel like Shopify is probably one of the most impressive software companies in the world in terms of releasing and features and knowing their audience and knowing their customers. Like, there's no one innovating at the pace that they're innovating. I don't even think Apple is anymore. That's another podcast rant that I could get into. I love Apple, been a shareholder since I've been 18, but so I own part of the company. As a part owner, not satisfied with their progress in the last 5-10 years. So Shopify has been amazing. So I first knew about it from the merchant side of things, and then over the last couple of years started coding on my own site, building things here and there, and basically kind of fell into doing freelance work. I started posting projects online, and people were like, of stuff I've done on my own site, and people were like, that's really cool. Can you make that into an app, or can you build it for me? And so that kind of just snowballed, one thing after the next. The startup I was working at just last year had huge layoffs. And at that point, I was kind of like, what do I do with my life? What am I doing? There's this path in the road. Do I go into more, and I've dabbled with freelance before, doing various projects in CMS land. My background in web dev is a lot of CMS projects and software and stuff. And so very familiar with templating languages and rendering dynamic data and all that sort of stuff. And so it's kind of this like fork in the road of like, do I pick up that freelance CMS stuff that I've been doing? Do I run full tilt into the Shopify land? Do I try and make this e-commerce thing work? And still trying to answer that question. But at this point, like I'm definitely 90% doing the freelance Shopify work. And it's been amazing. Like I love being able to partner with brands. I love being able to talk shop with them and more so than just like coding, but like offering solutions and talking through, oh, there's a brand I was working for a couple months ago, and they still kind of ping me in Slack asking questions about different solutions to use. And it sounds like they eventually want to like bring me on more, but they just don't have the budget for it. But it's cool to be able to talk through, this is the situation you're in. I've ran into this for various clients. I've ran into this for my own brand. Like I know and understand what's going on here, and let's talk through what makes sense, what are your options, and what makes the most sense for you. So I'm full on drinking the Kool-Aid along with the Red Bull, and it's been fantastic. That's kind of where I landed in the Shopify promised land, so to speak, and I'm loving it.
Oh, Karl, you're muted. You're talking.
Yeah,
so I'll jump in here real fast. But yeah, I mean, you were. It looked like you were getting into it. Well, and you skimmed over like some of the, because I know that we're talking about devs, but like as far as your small brand that you're running, you had some really big wins relatively recently too. Like you've been slogging away at that for forever, and you recently started getting into REI stores near you and stuff like that as well. You launched a wholesale website as well, so you're not only getting into the traditional storefront type stuff as well, but also some of the wholesale stuff and figuring that out. So that's really cool to be able to kind of come at it from both approaches and stuff. So. Yeah. But Karl, go ahead and say what you were saying before you were, we figured out you were muted.
I was just going to say, thank you. Yes, okay. I compute. I know computers. I was just going to say, you're kind of unique in that you're not only able to bring the Shopify development expertise in, but it sounds like you've got also a lot of the merchant side expertise in. And so as you work with these clients, there's obviously the bigger ones that have people on staff that know all that stuff, right? Kind of have it figured out. Then there's the smaller ones that don't even know that stuff exists, conversion rates, this and that, whatever, right? And you're kind of able to come into that middle sweet spot, right? Where folks still need some hand holding. And that's pretty cool that you're able to provide both of those.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk through that and also offer that in terms of like my value prop as a developer, as a freelancer, that sort of thing. And I've been sort of doing dev work for some clients, but also kind of running things as a e-commerce manager, just because it's like they don't have a person that can do that. And I always try and headline certain things like, hey, this is in the editor. You can go ahead and do it. This is where to find it. I can take care of it if you want, just so that they're aware. But a lot of times for certain people, depending on how big they are, it's just kind of like we want someone to get it done. So I've spent hundreds of hours in the Shopify editor as a merchant working on my own product. So I'm definitely very familiar with it from that capacity.
Yeah, I know we've had a couple of conversations about that too with, it's kind of wild when you're providing some support for a merchant and you just know the platform better because, you can at least see that side of as a merchant where they're running and doing all these other different things or what have you. And sometimes they're asking you for really simple, basic stuff. And so you're just like, hey, like you could do this. This is not like you don't need a dev to do this part. But just having that knowledge and that experience specific to the Shopify platform, even if it's not dev specific, you end up being very, very capable there, and people are just fine with like, no, just you go ahead and do it. I don't want to touch it. Just not only your experience both as a merchant, as a dev, so this merchant dev that's got experience on both sides, but specifically, you had this really cool like pre-order, kind of type deal for items that were going out of stock that you built out for yourself. And then you're, using that now, working with other freelancing clients and things of that nature. So I don't know if it would be cool for you to talk about kind of, one, how you initially identified this problem that was happening in your own shop. and then 2, how you actually started to approach this as a developer, and also the owner of this brand kind of type thing, where you're like, okay, like I can actually create something here, comparing existing solutions to what you actually wanted to do, and then what the actual implementation looked like. So the actual tools and things that you used. It would be really cool to hear kind of how you worked through that process.
Yeah, totally. I appreciate the 7-part question too.
Was
So
that
basically,
enough?
the pre-order, this pre-order feature, it was pretty cool. It happened because I was selling a product that was selling out really quickly, and I wanted to capture that demand and have those people convert and place their orders when they're most high intent. Like, there's back in stock notifications, email, text. Those aren't going to convert as high as 100%. They're pretty good, but
Right.
I wanted to capture that in the moment while they're on this page. And these products were selling out. Every time I dropped them, it was like a week or so and they sold out. So that was kind of the reason for it. I don't remember exactly what like the genesis was, but I do remember cruising through Twitter land, which D2C Twitter is awesome. I'm a big fan. Met lots of cool folks on there and seen lots of really good information. And Shane, I think it's Roston, had shared some stuff. I think his bio even says was the Shopify CRO guy at one point.
Yeah.
I think he's moved on from that. But he's really smart and shares a lot of good stuff. And so he built out a feature, some UI for the Breeze beverage folks, Shack and company. And it was really cool. Basically, it had a lot of the urgency indicators, a lot of the FOMO indicators that I was looking for. And it showed the percentage. It had a progress bar. So it showed a percentage of how much of the pre-order had been purchased. I think he had at a discount there too. It also showed an ETA for shipping because it was a pre-order. It's not going to be available immediately, and that's important to make that visible to the end user to minimize any CX concerns and that sort of thing. And so I took that and ran with it, branded it for my own brand, matched a lot of the UI in my own site and that sort of thing, and basically landed on a feature where it essentially looks like it shows, hot product at the top, has a few different progress bars that I built out in code, and would show 100% filled up in that progress bar for that pre-order that had shipped. And then it would also show sold out in like 3 days, sold out in 5 days or whatever, because that helped, solidify the urgency there and let the person know that, hey, this is gonna sell fast if you don't place an order now. And that was really fun to build that out. I shared some screenshots and that sort of thing on the Twitters. Found some people interested in the same sort of feature. Found some people that wanted me to build an app because I don't have enough things to do. I do want to get into app development maybe eventually, but at this point, I don't think I have any bandwidth for it.
Yeah.
But it would be cool sometime maybe. So that feature itself uses metafields and pretty extensively, which is pretty awesome. And also, you basically set the Shopify product to sell through after zero inventory. So your inventory is at 0 in Shopify, and then the metafield shows the amount that's coming in. So I just do some magic math there and calculate the percentage sold. And then I actually took that and ran with it, built it out for a client, Chris, who runs a salsa company. He's an awesome guy, and they were running batches of their salsa runs and selling out of them. Certain products, it might not have been the salsa actually, but certain products were selling out. And so he wanted to basically allow customers to buy into the batch rather, that it has an expected ETA in the future. So there would be a product that had 3 different batches all arriving at a different point this summer. So the first batch people could buy into, then it would sell out. Second batch people could buy into, and it would sell out. And those would have the ETAs on them, and then all of the typical like urgency, FOMO kind of stuff on the page in the UI. So I built that out for him and shared it on Twitter, and it was really fun because it was also on brand for him, matched the colors, the UI, that sort of thing, which is fun. Lots of fun here, obviously.
Lots of fun.
Yeah. That's kind of like the high level stuff. It's a cool little feature. I like building little things like that into Shopify, and it wasn't too complicated. I'm actually embarrassed to say it's not a snippet in code on my own website. It's literally a custom liquid block that I put all the code into. Don't do that at home, folks.
If it works, that's sometimes that's the easiest implementation. Like client needs something done or whatever. Sometimes it's easier just instead of like pulling down the theme and running a quick push or whatever. Just like I'm gonna drop this in a liquid block real fast. I do that all the time when I'm trying to like show a quick MVP for something stuff too. That's so handy to do. Yeah.
It's basically like my company doesn't pay me, so I'm gonna do this with minimal time. But hey, I'm gonna do all the right steps for clients and like obviously build out a block and all sorts of custom features for Chris in it and in the editor. But for me, it's like this block of code, and then I hop into VS Code and change it and that sort of thing, and then copy paste it back.
Right.
Nice. And how have you been able to assess the efficacy of that? Because what I'm trying to get at with this question, and I promise this won't be a 10-part question like Taylor's, is from the way you described it, it's not the most technically complex development project, but I'm assuming it's actually had a pretty big lift on your bottom line. And so as a developer, it's fun to step back and realize you don't have to write the most complicated code, do the most technically sophisticated thing to have a huge impact for a client or for yourself.
Yeah. The hardest part was actually doing the math to figure out the batches and setting up the variables and like figuring out how it's going to work in metafields, figuring out how it's going to render on the front end. I actually had to walk out of my office into my backyard, sit in my chair and write it out on paper because it just like wasn't, it's one of those things where you kind of get blocked in your head, blocked when you're trying to write the code. And it's like, no, I just need to pseudocode this out and just write it on paper. Like that's oftentimes the best way to solve a problem, or go for a walk and forget about it or sleep on it. Like those are the, those like dev hacks to figure out something. But you're right.
Just
like
look away from it.
Yeah. Not think about it to solve it. It's one of those cool features that definitely has a good solid lift. I'm curious to see the data from Chris, if he's willing to share with me at some point on how it worked for him, because he implemented it just recently. And for me, like I don't have like specific numbers, but I've definitely seen a lot of orders come in via that. And if I was a better person, I'd probably measure the CR rate before and after. CR rate.
Well,
CR is the rate.
So kind of as like getting at Karl's question maybe a little bit there too, because so you like you talked about the whole like notify when back in stock. That's a feature that's available, and there's some apps that like that's all they do, and then it's also built into some other larger scale like email marketing apps like Klaviyo, for instance, or whatever has that. That's a real common request to get that implemented kind of type thing. So and that was your thought or idea was the conversion rate's not like 100% on that. So like why even necessarily mess with it? You're sending additional emails, so like that's probably costing you extra kind of type thing as well. So you're kind of looking at this from what's the simplest implementation as a merchant and as a developer that I can get this done without adding another layer of complexity, right? So the good thing about those apps, usually they do have analytics, right? Like usually they're going to tell you like how many of these people have converted versus you're going to have to figure that out on your own. The question that I always have with pre-orders, like as far as like the thing that scares me about pre-orders is chargebacks. So people kind of like, if you can't fulfill within a certain period of time, people issue chargebacks. People talk about how horrible that is to deal with and those sorts of things. So is that something that you had as like consideration for a concern, or just because, I mean, I know you, like you said, you had like, you're not doing this for all products. You're doing this for like really high demand products where it's targeted. So maybe that's part of the strategy against that too.
Yeah. It's interesting. The chargeback thing, like I've definitely heard about it from the bigger fish in the pond on Twitter and people bemoaning it and stuff. And I'd like to say I finally made it as a merchant because I got my first chargeback a couple months ago. And then I've had a couple, it's like the weirdest thing. And they were like the weirdest situations where it was like, and it seems like this is always the case. Like that definitely shouldn't be a chargeback. Like I think someone actually got their credit card stolen and then someone issued a chargeback after they stole the card or something. It was weird. It was a weird situation, but yeah, chargebacks. Oh, that's a whole nother episode. So a few ways to mitigate that in this type of circumstance. I fortunately haven't had any chargebacks specific related to this feature, but it's the making it highly visible in terms of the ETA to have the product shipped was definitely a priority in the project for myself, as well as when I build it for clients, because that helps eliminate that type of thing. Basically, like on the product page, making sure that they know that it's ETA, like putting that in the block that's the pre-order, putting it very close to the buy button, adding it as a line item into the cart, so they can see it on their order summary, they can see it in their cart, and then they like when they get that order summary email, they can see that there right there that says ETA whatever. And then from a fulfillment side, like you mentioned Shopify Flow earlier, Taylor. I feel like that's like a super cool thing that if I had a free amount of like a free week of 40 hours, I would dig into it as much as possible, because I feel like there's 100 different use cases where I can use it in my own shop, and I've used it for various things, but this is definitely one of those circumstances where it's pretty awesome, because you can basically hold those orders so that they're not fulfilled by a 3PL or whatever, and tag them if you want, and that's like another component of it that you have to think about when you're building this type of thing. But that, to answer the chargeback thing, it's just like making it as visible as possible. I've had a few customers that wanted to cancel their pre-orders. That'll happen, but I feel like the ROI on it and the amount of orders that you capture on it make, a couple of orders that you get canceled, very small percentage of the amount of return that you're getting for the pre-order feature itself.
Yeah. So just a lot of like defense essentially on the front end, or maybe that would be offense. I'm not really sure how you want to look at that. Just making sure like it's super explicit all across the board that, when it's actually going to ship out, and it's not something that's going to be immediately fulfilled. So that's another one too with Shopify Flow. You mentioned that there's actually a way for you to, like, if you're manually capturing payments for people that want to do pre-orders, you could have a flow that will, for ones that aren't pre-orders, go ahead and capture the payment immediately, which is kind of interesting. So that does do kind of like the charge or whatever. And then if it's not a pre-order, you can actually execute a flow where it just goes ahead and captures that payment and stuff, which is kind of unique. But that would maybe one to look at potentially.
Yeah, what's interesting for this feature is I was capturing payments immediately. Like the payment capture is the same as like a normal product. It's like you're paying now and you're going to get it at a later date.
Yeah. Definitely strategies there.
Yeah, it was, and there's actually Cogsy is an inventory management app that I was using a couple months ago, and it had a similar type pre-order feature where it was basically like it was a nice feature to build into their platform, because it said like if you have a PO in our platform for the certain product and you enable the pre-order feature, we will add a little code snippet, or like you paste in a div that will target and inject code onto that essentially does everything my app does. So I forgot to mention that, but my feature was partially inspired by that. It just like took it to the next level with all the different functionality around FOMO and urgency indicators and batches for Chris, for example.
Nice. That's cool. Well, Taylor, is there anything else you want to make sure we hit today, or should we transition to the community stuff?
No, I mean, so as far as, let me double check, because I mean, I obviously have all sorts of questions and stuff when it comes to this. I thought
David,
the metafield implementation was really neat.
Yeah.
Lots of things on my mind.
Related to Shopify development.
Okay. I was thinking about like
not we got to stay off the lawn thing. That's we're So okay, and we won't do like anything like a sick pick or anything kind of type thing. But as far as maybe how about as far as, because you have a lot of experience outside of Shopify, right? And this is something we've talked about quite a bit, and versus like now you're working in Shopify quite a bit. And so I don't know if you have what is a good maybe mental model or thought process that's been helpful for you from having worked in like other aspects of web dev to now focusing on just Shopify specifically. So that there are a lot of other developers that I talk to or meet with, interact with, that aren't like Shopify only folks, right? And so that shift is a little bit difficult for some folks, right? But it's not. We're still talking about like web tech and those sorts of things as well. But I don't know if you've got anything that has been helpful for you for folks that are also looking to invest more time specifically in Shopify.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is like, it's wild to look at the differences and think about that from my background in web dev, because I've dealt with a lot of different things, like started with Vanilla.js, learned jQuery, learned React, then moved to Vue, learned Craft CMS, learned Static CMS, then ended up using Nuxt a lot, Nuxt 3 with Composition API, and using TypeScript and like building out middleware and like all this other web dev's so deep these days. There's that joke, I think Chris Coyer wrote a blog post about it a couple of years ago. It was like two front-end devs walk into a bar and don't have anything to talk about. And I love quoting that because it's like so true these days. And it's just like the depth, even to just like bundlers and stuff. So to get into it, it's like there is a lot of developer experience stuff that is, there's room for improvement in Shopify land. Like that was the biggest shocker, I think, was like they have a lot of docs and it is a robust platform, which makes so they should have a lot of docs. But I still feel like there's a lot of things that are missing in the docs, and there's a lot of like, this is how you get started and get going, and like all these little like, you know, sort of auxiliary questions, like all the questions I've asked you, Taylor, over the last couple months of like, how do I pull down a theme, like just management, like theme management, for example, like there should be a lot more around that. Like, how do I, you know, what's the workflow for this? How do I integrate with GitHub? You know, there's the GitHub integration, but like, how does this actually work? And like, what is the best practices? Do you build out a separate repo for a different theme? Do you use a branch? Like, what are the implications of doing these different things? And Shopify development is really interesting too, because I feel like it's a lot of band-aids. It's a lot of plugging holes. And it's unfortunate because looking at a lot of client sites, it's kind of like Swiss cheese in some ways. And it's unfortunate because I feel like there's some clients that I work for that are like, you guys need to rebuild this site from scratch, because this is like a Jenga puzzle, and it makes every single Jenga puzzle you pull out piece and put it on top of one another. Yeah, you're only paying the dev like X amount of hours, but like that thing's going to crash eventually, and you're just making it incrementally harder and worse for future devs if you keep, you know, adding to the problem. And I try and mitigate that as much as possible and leave code comments. And I think that's kind of the nature of these platforms, where it's like the primary goal isn't to build a web platform, isn't to do coding. The primary goal for these businesses are to sell things online, and the web platform and the code behind it is sort of like this afterthought, this thing they don't really think about. It's more like to facilitate the action, rather than when I've worked at other places and worked on like startups and stuff, building websites, like there's a dev team, there's a dev director. They understand like this is the core component, and the foundation needs to be really strong. And yeah, even things like missing bundlers, like I remember, like I've used Tailwind extensively since the beta days, and it's been funny to watch the world churn over the Tailwind debate and see people love and hate it and watch them change over the years. But like using things like that, using tools like that, and Alpine.js, for example, that's something I've used pretty extensively in the past for CMS sites. And Shopify is like, a lot of it is just, it's like vanilla.js, or it's like jQuery, and it's like, you know, here's a theme.liquid file that's got 8,000 lines of code in it and random injections all over the place. And there's some pages for clients where it's, you're fighting against apps because the entire page is injected onto a div from an app. And it's just, it is messy. And I think Shopify recognizes that in some ways, I hope. And I think that I see the checkout extensibility changes as sort of a way to mitigate that, where it's like, here's the playground that you can play in, here's the tools you can use, but we're going to like limit a lot of the things. So it's not just this checkout.liquid file that you can do whatever you want, wherever you want. Like that is the Wild West. That is nuts. And so hopefully there's more bumpers, guardrails that they can put up to help make things a little bit easier. And it's so hard because a lot of times merchants reach for an app for different things, and that's good and bad, right? Like that's kind of a quick fix in some ways. It's like, oh, and I've done that myself for sure. Like I have way too many apps installed on my store. I've worked to decrease that over the years, but I get it. It's like, oh, I want to solve this particular need. I'm going to go install this app. I don't know if the code is solid. I don't know if it's going to have a hit on site speed. You know, a lot of different things that are questions that merchants don't know to ask, when in fact, like it could be some custom code that they got to hire a developer to, that could be a one-off. But the flip side to that is there's a lot of maintenance that needs to happen. I don't think I recommend building custom carts, for example, custom card slide outs, like just use UpCart or something like that, because they've got the maintenance down. They've got like, you know, feature build outs down, and you don't want to, you know, like the small folks that don't have a designated dev can't really like rely on someone to maintain that, or like hire a dev every 6 months to update it if they want a certain feature. So there's definitely a use case for apps. Yeah, it's been pretty interesting. Like in its core, Liquid and templating and that sort of thing is very simple. But I feel like the biggest undertaking with Shopify development is getting into the actual code itself for client stores, where it's just kind of a mess, and there's oftentimes not any documentation left on how things work. Oftentimes you're just kind of left on your own, and you have to figure it out, like, well, how did this there's one client site where discounts are just patched together. There's like 10 different settings in 10 different places on how discounts render and what the UI is to show them. Some of it depends on product tags. Some of it depends on the compare at price. Some of it depends on the settings in the sidebar. And there's these files, like the price.liquid files, like hundreds of lines long, and to sit there and grok through it is really difficult. So I feel like that's kind of the biggest difference I've seen, is like overall lack of documentation. And it's not necessarily on Shopify's end. A lot of it is just like, here's this organic beast that's growing and growing, and people are adding code and apps are adding code, and there's not necessarily a single source of truth for how to understand it. Like when you're building an app that's standalone like that at a technology company, or not, like a startup or something like that, a lot of times there's documentation left. Or I've worked at agencies over the years that have built websites and maintained them for companies for long periods of time, and they have standards in place, they have documentation in place, even just like ESLint standards, like things like that, where it's like these are fairly absent from a lot of client projects I've worked on. And so there's no go-to standard. It's just like every time I save a file, it completely rewrites it or whatever, reformats it, and then that like messes up the Git history in some ways, because you can't look at it and see what you actually changed.
Right. Yeah.
Just one thing. Yeah, there's a lot. I could go on to that topic for a while, I would think, but yeah.
Yeah, there's some trade-offs with like Shopify being as flexible as it is, where that flexibility allows obviously for a lot of ingenuity or creativity in how different solutions get implemented, as the positive spin on that. And so there are definitely areas where, a little bit more of an opinionated approach is good. So check out extensibility, great example of like how that's starting to kind of get rolled out in that direction. And I think we'll continue to see more of that, just, app embeds and those sorts of things within themes, instead of like, just stuff being like injected straight into the theme. I think like it's definitely moving in the right direction, but yeah, I can definitely understand the concern there. And it is always weird when you drop into something where there's no documentation from something custom from another dev. And then you kind of have to, part of the gig is just figuring out what the heck's going on. So, but that's how we all can do better. So just providing some documentation, write some code comments, like, and call it a day, man, but yeah, for sure.
Speaking of what the heck's going on, Taylor, do you want to tell us a little bit about what's going on with the changelog?
Yeah, for sure. So like just real quick,
good segue.
There were a couple of, if we want to transition the segue into there's now a cart cookie value now includes a key param. So for folks that are working, with the online store and with the cart, there's actually a key that can be included there. Also, the storefront API cart ID will now include that as well, which is handy, particularly if you're using that for some really fun stuff as well. So just real quick notes on that as far as that being a deal, because you actually have to provide that. That's one of those where there's got that actions required. And so just something to take a look at if you haven't as well. That's kind of a big deal. And then, there's some stuff in there about pixels and customer privacy settings and config, which is cool and stuff as well. But also another point, there's obviously some focus on the cart right now because there's also a note in here about enhanced handling for large quantities of the cart API. Which I thought was really interesting, because I personally have never run into this where I've tested like the quantity value here, but like exceptionally large quantities exceeding 1 million at the update endpoint for the cart API. Previously that was the value, and it would return a 200 OK without notifying the user. But now it will actually return a 422 unprocessable entity status, so that way you can do what you need to do there, potentially to break that up and submit that in batches or whatever you got to do there, kind of type thing. So just real quick, call outs there. And then obviously I always check the scheduled tab because there's cool stuff coming down the pipe as well that should be rolling out here shortly.
You might hit that 1 million item limit when you're ordering all those batteries for your lawnmower. You probably have to kind of
Clip.
Thanks for that as always. All right, sure. Pick of the week. David, have you had time to think about it, or should I make Taylor go first?
Definitely make Taylor go
first.
Okay.
What?
I'll go first.
Oh,
Carl, I say you haven't been talking at all.
I had two. No, I'm sorry. I got a really bad headache in the middle of the podcast. Not because of David. I don't think. Could be, though.
Because of me?
You don't think. I have that effect on people.
Yeah, that's clear. So I have two. But I'm going to say them both. I'm only going to expound on one. I'm going to say them both because I think the one is worth looking up. I recently was in an in-person meeting with an Australian coworker who flew in for the event, and she brought some stuff, cultural exchange kind of thing, and she introduced us to this thing called the Tim Tam Slam. If you haven't done it before, look it up on YouTube. It's a way of eating a particular cookie and coffee. It's kind of cool. It's too complicated to explain, though. The other one we introduced, though, is this idea of a game called fouling, which was this thing we did as a group in Atlanta. Went to this fouling center, and imagine bowling, and you have like the pin set up. Imagine you have two of those, and they're separated by a large distance. So you've got one set of pins facing another set of pins, separated by, I don't know, like 30 feet or something. So you have two teams, one behind each set of pins, and you each have we have one football. You take turns throwing the football and trying to knock the pins over with the football, which seems pretty easy, but it's not. And there's a lot of erratic behavior that occurs when the football misses and starts tumbling around because you're not allowed to touch it until it stops at a certain spot. And so hilarity ensues. It's fun. It's football. It's bowling. Fouling.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah. That's my pick.
That's your pick. The two picks. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. David?
Yeah, David. Go in. You got it?
Sick pick. I've got a sick pick. Oh yeah, I remembered it. I forgot it for a second. That was awkward. I sometimes play video games and sometimes play old video games and pretty much play video games in one vein of video games and sort of do it as like a decompress, which is kind of ironic, self-care sort of thing. Trying not to work 24/7. So my sick pick is Call of Duty World War II. This is an older game from like 5 years ago or something.
Nice.
And my friend and I have been playing it here and there. It is a classic. It's fairly fun, and turns out there's at least like 50 people still playing it online because we get into matches still, doing the multiplayer on the internet. And I'm not very good, but it's fun. That's my sick pick.
That's awesome.
Speaking
man.
of old games, David, you'd appreciate this. On the flight home, the guy next to me was playing a Game Boy Color, and at first I thought it was some kind of like retro, like ironic thing. Like, oh, where'd you get? And no, this is the OG because he didn't have any backlight or anything. He was trying to look.
Whoa!
I know
that'd be so difficult because those screens are like a third of the cell phone screen and like a tenth of the resolution, 100th of the resolution. So I feel like you'd have to be like super hipster status to try and actually pull that off. Yeah. That's was it did. Pokemon?
It was.
Yeah. I mean, what else would you? Yeah, what
Super
else?
Hipster status. Was it Pokemon? Bam! I knew it.
I mean, I wasn't playing mine while Karl was talking earlier. Definitely not.
That's all right, my sick pick is going to be. So I don't know if y'all run into this issue where if you Karl's got his AirPods, but they get filthy and they're disgusting because of the earwax and stuff. I have a problem with earwax, So there's actually, I don't know if y'all have seen these. You can just get them off Amazon or whatever, but it's just this little cleaning device or whatever. I'm trying to show it in here, but it comes out. But anyways, it's just really small, but you can get in there and like clean out cause I was complaining about this to my older brother. And he was like, oh, just get one of these. And so he shot me a link for this thing. And it's great because apparently I have terrible problems with wax because they're terrible. I only wear mine like when I'm like working out. And so otherwise, if I'm at my desk, I wear these. But so obviously I need to clean them pretty regularly and super solid. Love those.
If you save the wax, you make a candle out of it eventually.
Oh, my. That's disgusting.
I probably could. That's That's weird. Is that a thing? Like human
Oh yeah, everyone does
earwax candles?
Oh yeah.
Stuff.
Okay.
Not everyone does this, Karl. This is
No.
this is a problem. This is because I've never heard of this. If it's a
I think we
thing,
need to
I'm
talk.
interested.
Just being thrifty. Anyway.
That's
excuse me while I go vomit outside my shed.
that's
I recently picked up a multifunctional cleaning brush for the same idea, because if you look down at my keyboard, and I have a golden retriever at home, so that means I have a golden retriever in every single nook and cranny everywhere.
Yep.
And
beautiful dogs shed everywhere.
Literally, our house is like, we run Roomba once a day, and it's still, you walk through and there's like an inch of hair. We probably should make a candle out of it. And then I also got this universal duster that's like a gel thing. I'm intrigued to try these to clean the keyboard.
How does that work?
I imagine, I don't know.
You like put it down over top of it and then pull it off, kind of type thing.
Should we do a live unboxing?
Is it?
Yeah, you're going to, so I suppose we'll keep watching.
Yeah, we are. Is this video recorded?
Yeah,
it is. For those of you listening on the podcast, David is opening up
a package, yes, with a big knife.
Cleaning gel stuff.
Large knife.
It comes in a round plastic container.
Yeah, it says Universal Dust Cleaner, Color Corral off. Replace the gel if the color changes. Recommend changing within 3 months. Well, that's annoying.
So does it just absorb it from the air?
It looks like it's like, what are those kid toys that people get for their kids and then immediately regret it? That's like gooey and...
There's so many of those.
Oh, yeah.
I just described
many of those.
all of
literally every toy ever.
No, but this is like jelly.
He's shaking the can up and down.
It's
what are you?
I don't know. I'm scared to pull this out.
It makes me think of Flubber. You guys remember
everywhere.
Flubber? You watch that?
Uh-huh.
Oh, Ron Williams.
Oh, it feels like Flubber.
Looks like Nickelodeon slime.
And then apparently you just stick it on your keyboard and hopefully it doesn't get in the crevices. But
he's tapping his keyboard with the slime.
I'm pressing my keyboard, and now all the keyboard shortcuts are going nuts. I'm gonna do this when my keyboard's not connected.
You gotta turn the keyboard off and then do it. Man, you can't. Yeah,
but it's slime.
I'm
slime.
intrigued.
That's the kid toy. It looks like it's like just basically slime that doesn't get everywhere.
Huh. Well, there you go. What they can't do these days.
I know.
We'll need a follow-up. You'll have to let us know how it goes when we post this episode. If your keyboard's totally shot now at that point, or if the slime is working.
Yeah.
Well, I think we will put our listeners' misery to an end now and call it. Yeah.
For the 3 people that have made it this far, go get slime.
That's right. But David, people want to find you. Where should they do that?
On the internet. Don't find me in person. Just kidding. My Twitter handle is not easy to spell. Ostriker27.
We'll drop in the show notes.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Okay.
You're supposed to say, "Come to my store, Rainier Watch Extravaganza." Yeah,
get some merch that only makes sense if you're from the Pacific Northwest. No, that's cool. You should check it out too.
Yeah.
It is a comfortable shirt.
Yeah,
so your stories on there and everything. Yeah.
I've got that too. I should have worn it.
Oh yeah, what were you thinking?
And if people wanted to contact you for freelance work, they would do that on Twitter. If they figure out
sick hat, Taylor. For those watching or listening at home, Taylor just put on a special, super cool Rainier Watch hat, available on shopranierwatch.com, where every purchase protects our national parks. Oh, sick pick. Sorry, you were saying something, Karl, that was probably really important.
If people wanted to hire you, which I don't know that anyone would after this, but let's just say
if you leave your lawn mowed, no. If you want some super epic Shopify custom development, I am available and booking work in the next couple months ish. Lindahlcorp.net is my cool domain. That's my single person studio. But you can also DM me on Twitter. The link will be in the show notes. Yeah. Love to help you out.
Awesome. David, thank you so much for being on with us. It was great to get to talk to you. And Taylor, it's good to see you as always.
You too, Karl.
Thanks, gents. Appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, guys.